All right, sorry about that. We'll get started here in just a minute and a little audio issues, but we'll kick off things shortly. Okay, welcome to the quarterly product webinar. We're very excited you all are here. My name's Sam, and I'll be leading you through this. On the call also is Mike and Garrett. We're all product managers here at FlashTrack, and we're really excited to show you and review, where we were this last quarter, and also go through, where we're headed for the next few months for the product team. If you have any questions or comments at any time, don't hesitate to use the Q&A feature of the chat, and we'll happily jump in there. This will be recorded and something we'll be happy to share out with anyone who registered and as we go through the webinar. So with that, we'll dive in and start going through it. So as far as the agenda today, one of the things we want to cover is kind of threefold. One, we're going to review the prior quarter. We're going to go through a demo of the functionality we released. And then also we're going to do cover some features we released through some slides and screenshots, and then we'll touch on what's upcoming, some of the biggest features, and kind of where we're focusing our product resources, and then leave room at the end for Q&A. Like, we want to hear feedback, especially around the things we released and the things we're going to work on, what works best for your team. What do you want to see? What do you think about what we did release and what and where we're headed with that? So definitely pass that feedback along to us, and we'll happily take it from there. So with that, we'll kind of start looking at product updates. So all these things we're going to touch on and demo, these are things that are released and you can take advantage of now. Maybe you don't have a specific feature enabled in your account or you're not involved in payments, but all these things we're about to cover are things we released in the past 3 months and are live in the app today. So 5 of the biggest areas we'll focus on in this demo that Garrett will kick off with us shortly is looking at the payments workflow. So unconditionals and issuing ACH, what does that look like through FlashTrack, the improvements we've made to lower tier. Then I'll touch on the new reports with invoices and compliance, as well as some general billing process improvements. And then Mike will focus on the integrations and the changes we've made for that. So with that, I'm going to pause sharing and then I'll pass it over to Garrett and he will take it away for the demo.
Cool. Thank you, Sam. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Get this pulled up over here. All right. Perfect. So yeah, like Sam mentioned, really going to be tackling a few of kind of the big rocks that we've either released or improved over the last quarter. I'm going to be starting by quickly covering kind of like the payments and unconditional lien waiver vault workflow. I know some of you on this call may already be leveraging this, but hopefully for anybody that is not leveraging it, this can be a good sort of taste as to what it can be like to collect those unconditionals super easily and then ultimately pay out your subcontractors. So go ahead and dive in. So currently logged in as a general contractor, and I have 2 projects here on my dashboard. So we'll go ahead and click inside of the unconditional lien waiver vault demo project. And just to kind of set the stage a little bit, I have 1 contract for this project. It's a plumbing contract, and I've gone ahead and set up a few billing requirements for this contract. So here we have a default final unconditional waiver, a default partial unconditional. I also am collecting conditional progress and final waivers for this particular contract, and then also the FlashTrack standard pay app. So both of these unconditional requirements will be leveraging the unconditional lien waiver vault, and go ahead and show you guys how that works. So go ahead and log in as a subcontractor. Get to our dashboard here. Go ahead and enter in some progress percentages. So we'll just do 25%. Review and submit bill. And this is where the unconditional lien waiver vault starts to come into play. So what we're doing is we're actually generating those unconditional lien waivers at the time of submission, but we're putting this unofficial stamp on the document. So ultimately what this means is that the sub is going to sign the unconditional, but it won't be available until either you've paid the subcontractor through FlashTracked or you've gone in, marked that invoice as paid, and then ultimately the sub has verified payment. But really the biggest value here is instead of having to chase down this unconditional waiver after the fact, as soon as the sub is verified payment or as soon as you've paid them, this document will be available. So we'll go ahead and sign this as the sub. Just throwing up a little message to the subcontractor, letting them know that we're not going to release this document until they've been paid. We'll go ahead and sign our pay app, and then we'll sign our conditional waiver as well. We'll go ahead and submit our invoice. And now if we go back to the general contractor, what we'll be able to see is this pay app is now pending approval. And we can go ahead and approve it and show you what that lien waiver vault looks like. So you can see here, there's a pay app pending approval. Go ahead and approve it. And now if we go to actually see that submission, we can see that the unconditional waiver is available, but it still has that unofficial stamp on it. So in order to remove that unofficial stamp and get the official version of the unconditional, we have to ultimately go through the payment process. So the way that the payment process works in FlashTracked is there's a couple of different roles involved, but typically the first step in the process is somebody normally from the AR team is monitoring the bank account to understand when the owner has funded the period that you're trying to pay. And once you've received funding for that period from the owner, you can click Ready to Pay, and that will send all of the approved invoices for this period to the Invoices tab. And here I can see that I have my unconditional lien waiver vault demo invoice here. I can see that the unconditional waiver is still locked and it's in the vault waiting on payment verification. So now what I can do as this role here is I should be able to go ahead and pay this invoice. Let me double check and see what permissions that I have set up because we do lock down. I think we need to set up my user as a payments approver. So we'll go ahead and do that really quickly because we only allow payments approvers to approve those payments. So we'll go ahead and save that. Go back. And now I can see that, or I should be able to see that this is pending my approval. Go ahead and refresh the page really quickly. There we go. So I'll go ahead and mark this invoice as ready to pay. And then once the invoice has been fully approved by the payments approvers, we then have a payments issuer role that is responsible for either issuing ACH payment or marking the invoices as paid in the system. For the sake of the demo, we'll go ahead and mark this invoice as paid. And now what happens is the subcontractor will get notified that the invoice has been marked as paid, and they can actually go in on their side and verify the payment. So we'll go ahead and do that. So they can see here that the general contractor has marked this invoice as paid. They can verify that that is indeed the case. And now that the subcontractor has verified payment, finally, if we log back in as the general contractor, we can get access to that unconditional lien waiver. So we'll go ahead and log in. Go to our payments and waivers tab. now we can see that that unconditional lien waiver has been unlocked and all of the unofficial stamps have been removed off of it. And it is the official document, easily collected without having to hunt down the subcontractor and email them and, you know, constantly wait for them to provide that unconditional waiver before payment. The last thing that I'll mention about that workflow before diving into a quick lower tier demo is that, again, we have two kind of options for paying subcontractors in FlashTrack. Option number one, which is by far the most streamlined and automated, is to leverage our ACH payment workflow. And if that workflow is being used, that step of the subcontractor having to verify the payment can actually get skipped because, you know, we keep track on our side. Once that ACH transaction has settled, we automatically unlock the unconditional lien waiver. And then, of course, the other option is simply marking it as paid instead of transferring it via ACH. Of course, with that, there's the extra step of the sub having to verify it, like we saw in the demo. So that's kind of the core workflow. Again, if there's any questions, we can handle that. I think in the end, we have a Q&A section, but for now, I'll go ahead and transition over to a quick lower tier demo. So again, logged in as the general contractor. I have this lower tier demo project set up. And what I've done is I've gone ahead in project settings and enabled the track lower tier subcontractors and suppliers setting. So what does that actually look like? We'll go ahead and log in as the subcontractor. We can see what types of information we track for lower tiers. All right, so as the subcontractor, I will go ahead and enter in my invoice amount. And then as I move forward with the bill submission process, I can now see that this general contractor has required that I report all lower tier subs and suppliers. I can go ahead and continue. And from here, I can actually build out my lower tier list. So we'll call this concrete supplier. Give it a type, give it a contract value, and then a point of contact. And then once I have done that, it is now added into my lower tier list. And you as the general contractor have access to this list. And then before I actually move forward as the subcontractor, there are several different actions that I can take here. So first of all, I can enter the estimated payment amount for this period. So if you track payment amounts for lower tier vendors and suppliers as a way to mitigate risk, this system easily lets you do that. So let's say, for example, I'm planning on paying my concrete supplier $1,000 for this month. I can enter that here. Additionally, I can also provide lower tier lien waivers. So of course, typically what would happen is, you know, this would be for a previous month in most cases, but I'll go ahead and upload a waiver here just to show you guys what it looks like really quickly. I have a waiver I can drag and drop over here. And let's see here. Go ahead and just drag over this guy here. And then that waiver becomes accessible for you as the general contractor. You can see how many waivers exist for that lower tier. And then as the sub, as I continue to submit my bill, I can see here we throw another flag, just making sure that all of this information is up to date and accurate. And then lastly, we have the ability to generate a sworn statement for all of that lower tier information. So we'll see what that looks like here in a second. Go ahead and sign our progress waiver, sign our pay app. And then here we have a sworn statement that FlashTrack is generating for your subcontractor. Here we can see the table of any lower tier subs and suppliers. Any sort of payment information is also populating this table. Go ahead and sign it as the subcontractor and submit our pay app. So the lower tier module provides a great way for you to start kind of moving a lot of this tracking of lower tiers out of spreadsheets and into FlashTrack. Additionally, in the example that I walked through as the subcontractor, of course, the sub was the one that added the lower tier, but we also have the ability for you as the general contractor to add lower tiers on behalf of the sub. And then lastly, as it relates to adding lower tiers as a GC, we also give you the ability to track whether or not you've received a notice of furnishing, and you can upload that notice into FlashTrack to keep track of it. So we'll discuss a little bit later where we're kind of going with lower tiers longer term. But that's sort of the gist of, hey, what can FlashTrack do today to help me with lower tiers? And in a nutshell, it's, FlashTrack allows you to create a supplier list. FlashTrack will allow you to track lower tier waivers, and FlashTrack will be able to generate sworn statement documents for your subs based on the estimated payment amounts that were entered into the system. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen and kick it back over to Sam to pick up the next section.
Great, thanks, Garrett. So I'm going to cover reports and then some few other general improvements around billing, and I'll pass it to Mike for integration. So two things we released and that I'd like to focus on this past quarter was the invoices report and the compliance report. So the compliance report is great that it shows you all the existing compliance requirements in your account. So if I come in here, it's really useful to use this report to say, okay, so let me see the compliance requirements that are all pending my review, so that I can see, okay, which ones I need to act on and who's the vendor. Earthworks has submitted a lot, and where do I need to go from there? Or I can just filter for the ones that aren't compliant. And now I can easily generate a list, or I can start to work these across different projects and know which compliance items need my attention the most. So it's really useful to get a complete list or to get really specific lists like this, where you have specific compliance requirements. And then the invoice report is also new to FlashTrack. And this one is very valuable in seeing the invoices across all the projects in your account. So from one list, I can see, within the past 30 days, what has been submitted. And I can know, by status, where are we moving with these invoices that were submitted. And I can know, who is the specific approver that needs to go in and look at these invoices, or who approved that report and when. And again, I can also export this list, or I can go back to the very beginning of the year and say, what were all the invoices submitted and what were their amounts and when were they approved? How long did it take? Who approved those? And get a lot of really rich data and see what was declined or what wasn't, just in one place in FlashTrack without having to go project by project. I can now pull all these invoices from these reports. So from reports, I'll show another feature we are excited to add around billing that will make it a little bit more seamless. So one of the things that our customers kept running into is people who are required to approve invoices occasionally might be out on PTO or out in the field and not have access to a computer. And it was the end of the month or end of the billing period, and they really needed somebody to come in and approve this, but the person who was set to approve wasn't. So customers would get stuck. So in this case, we added a override approvers function. This does exactly what it sounds like. So let's say Bill is here, he's on PTO and he can't submit this invoice. He's out for the next 2 weeks or 30 days, whatever the case may be. I, as the project admin, can come in here and I can either approve this invoice or decline it based on the requirements, and I can keep this billing moving forward. So in this case, I'll approve it, and it gives me confirmation. And then now it goes on to the next approver for them to approve or decline this invoice. So it really enables our customers to keep the billing process moving, even if someone on their team is out on PTO or can't log into FlashTrack and review the documents and the paperwork as invoices were submitted. So override approvers, we're hoping is definitely used and can help in those one-off situations where you might have the approver out. And then lastly, generate final bill. So we were working with customers and they were constantly mentioning that at the end of contracts, they'd get to the point where, okay, we only have retainage left, but we had something in the real world come up where now we need to credit or reduce the overall contract amount because we don't need as much concrete or we didn't need as much of a parking lot, whatever the case may be. And so they'd have everything billed out 100% except for a deductive change order and retainage held. So what they don't want to do is, bill for this change, get the sub to log in, bill for this change order, then release retainage, then have the sub bill for that retainage for two reasons. One, that's a lot of back and forth with the sub, but also it made the final conditional or the final invoice a little bit different from what they would expect it to be. So we added generate final bill to kind of help solve with this. So when I click complete contract, what we see here in this summary is you have 400K of unreleased retainage. You billed for everything else. You've got a negative or deductive change order of 250,000. So the amount that this subcontractor is going to be billing for will be the net of that, which is 207,000 in this case. So it's a really seamless way of generating a bill with the net of unbilled line items, unbilled change orders, and unreleased retainage, so that we can get in one final swoop a final bill that the subcontractor can submit for that exact amount that we would expect to pay, which is 207,000. And all that would line up on the 702, and everything would make sure we tie out. But this generate final bill function for specific contracts where you have changes at the end of it becomes really, really useful in generating that paperwork that results in a kind of seamless transition at the end of the contract. So those were three things that we were excited to release this past quarter, with the reports, the override approvers, and the generating final bill. And so with that, I'll pass it to Mike, who will touch on integrations.
Thanks, Sam. All right, so we recently updated our Procore integration to work in a more automated fashion so that once you import a project, any new data that you create in Procore will automatically flow into FlashTrack. So I'm going to start over here in Procore and just show a quick project we've created called our Procore webinar project with one approved commitment. We'll come into FlashTrack. We'll select our Start Import button. We'll be presented with our list of projects from Procore. We'll see we've not yet imported this project. We can select it. Click Next, get our final review here. You'll see that we're guiding you through every step of the way, each of the steps you're taking in selecting this project, and finally confirm we want to import the project. At this point, we'll be just listed with a quick confirmation screen, letting us know that our project import did succeed and what that project number is in our system. From here, you can click our View Projects button to jump to our project dashboard. We'll see our webinar product here. I'll put in my undername. I want to call out some indicators we've now added to our integrations as well to make it more clear how closely tied your contracts in FlashTrack are to your contracts in Procore or other integrations. You'll see we have this mapping status icon here on our contract that we integrated. So I click into here, we'll see all of our various pieces pulled over from Procore. We have our subcontractor already assigned, invitation not yet sent though. That's still something we leave available to you. We have the amount of that contract. We bring in that contract number from Procore, and we set that retainage value of the contract based on what you have in Procore as well. Now to come over into my contract in Procore, we're going to take a look at my cost codes in the schedule of value that I've set up here. We just have this one set up, code 1, we named it, and it's our 02-220 cost code. So I'm going to do is just create a quick line in FlashTrack to show how we tie back to that to make sure that we know that we're allocating all the costs to the right cost code in Procore. We'll select our settings button up here, and we'll click on mapping to our work order items from Procore. And we'll see our cost code that we just looked at in Procore over here. along with that description and the amount associated with it. So we'll just do a quick one-time drag and drop. Save that mapping. And if you're using the subcontractor schedule values, we can also push that over to our Procore system. Now, if I jump back into my project here, you'll see that we've now updated our mapping status to show that this is complete for this contract. Similarly, if I jump back to my total project view, you'll see that I can now see that my total mapping across all contracts for this project are mapped. The last thing we're going to do is we're just going to go take a look at the change orders that already exist on this project and contract. And we'll see we have one here, but it's in draft status. So I'll commit to this change order, and I'm just going to move this along and approve it. And click save. Now, with no additional effort from your end, we come back into FlashTrack and we give a refresh to our screen here. We'll see we now have a net change order for $500 that'll show up automatically in your schedule of values. And in our change order management, we'll also see that that change order is flowed over. Now, that's just an example of our Procore integration, but really we're just getting the Procore integration up to speed with the rest of the integrations that we already offer. So from our existing work right now, we already have the Procore integration that I just demoed, Sage 300 and Vista, and all these integrations work in a very identical fashion. That import flow that I showed you with the step-by-step guide to get through the import process, that'll look the same. The mapping steps would all be the same, including the indicators where we call out whether or not you have done that step yet. So have a variety of integrations. That experience would be as simple and seamless and automated for all three of them. With that, I'm going to kick it back to Sam to share some of the features we have coming down the pipeline.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. And so we wanted to wrap up just reviewing kind of what was done in the quarterly after demoing some of those features. There are other additional features that we want to talk through just on some slides quickly, starting with our compliance service. So this was an exciting service that we just launched called Flash UI, and it's a way for you to outsource your subcontractor compliance management to a certified FlashTrack account manager that you would work directly with. So we recognized and heard a lot of feedback from our customer base that the managing COIs is a lot of manual, kind of mind-numbing work, right? It's constantly requesting new COIs for every contract, back and forth communication for the proper insurance, right? Working with subs. Hey, what do you need from me? And they submit it. No, it's wrong. How do I need to correct it? What are the limits you need? And then manually verifying all that continued coverage, storing all those documents. Just a lot of manual time throughout the life of each project for every single contractor. Specifically, really diving into the Accord, what people were doing mostly was not just collecting these COIs, they were just looking at their expiration dates and failing to check, do these limits actually line up to what I need per the policy requirements or per that signed contract, and making sure they had the valid insurance that weren't going to hit us. Or even if there was, maybe 20, 30 pages of endorsements, what in that language is potentially modifying this insurance to not make it well. So we see a lot of different challenges, and that's one of the things we sought out to kind of solve with this service that we launched. And so part of this, at a high level, how it works is, you would work with a dedicated account manager, and they would request the COIs and W-9s and key documents for each new subcontractor across all your jobs. Then we would validate and review each one of those documents, checking the limits, checking the policy requirements, and making sure that every single thing lines up with what you need in the signed contract. And then we would work directly with your subs and their insurance agents to correct it. And then we track that ongoing insurance and making sure that as those COIs expire, new ones are brought in and that they too meet the policy requirements. So a really exciting service that we've been able to partner with a few of our customers already on. And we're seeing that we're able to eliminate a lot of manual tasks for anyone managing compliance within their company. And we can certainly dive into more details if you're interested at any point. So then shifting gears a little bit, looking at some project settings, again, some of those quality of life, everyday things that you might run into. So starting first with this one, the default billing period. This is a feature we added inside your company settings that allows you to choose your most common default billing period. In this case, let's say it starts at the 10th and ends at the 25th. As soon as you set this in your company settings, it then inherits that on all new projects. So if you go to create a new project tomorrow, you won't have to worry about setting that billing period in the new project. It'll just take this one from the company settings that you configured once. So our goal is faster setup, less mistakes on your end. And then secondly, the revision billing window. So this is a setting inside the project that allows you to set a time frame for when you want subcontractors to be able to resubmit an invoice. So let's say you get to the 20th, the last day of the billing period, subcontractor comes in and submits their invoice that morning, only to have the PM decline that invoice later towards the end of the day. And now it's the 21st, it's outside the billing period, and the sub is stuck. Well, we added the declined revision billing window so that you can say, hey, allow subcontractors to resubmit an invoice, 5 days or 3 days after the last day of the billing period. And so that's what you're seeing here at the top of this invoice, where it says, hey, this was declined, but you have an additional 5 days here to resubmit this through the May 25th, so that you, as the project admin, you don't have to go in and change that billing period just to allow for those onesie twosies at the end of the month. So again, some quality of life things that we're always focused on and hope are most valuable for you and your team. So from here, I'll pass it to Garrett to touch on a few of these billing flexibility features.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sam. So first one we wanted to touch on that I think most of y'all have probably experienced so far is the unapprove a pay app feature. So we had a lot of customers for a long time that would have to go through customer support to unapprove a pay app that had already been approved. And ultimately what we've done is we've moved this inside of the app to make it a little bit more streamlined for you to kind of undo something, a pay app that was approved if, maybe there was ultimately an issue with the pay app. Maybe the owner came back and said, hey, this isn't going to fly. You got to undo this. So instead of having to go through support, you can now come into FlashTrack and unapprove this pay app yourself, as long as you have the project admin permissions. And then once the pay app's been unapproved, it will go back to the subcontractor, kind of in a similar fashion to if it was declined. So the subcontractor would be able to log in and adjust the amounts. We would generate all new fresh documents for them to sign. And then ultimately they could resubmit for that pay app if it makes sense to do so. Yeah, that's kind of some of the flexibility that we've added around unapproving. So Sam, if you want to go to the next slide. So another piece of flexibility that we've added kind of to the invoicing workflow is the ability to cancel an outstanding retainage invoice. So this came into play, quite a few times. If maybe retainage was released either on accident or, not at the right time. Prior to this update, your subcontractors would have to go in, submit for that retainage bill, and then you could decline it to kind of get it back to that state. So now what we've done is, as long as the sub has not submitted for that retainage, you can actually cancel that outstanding invoice as long as, again, the sub hasn't billed for it. And if you cancel it, it will essentially unrelease that retainage that you had previously released and give you the opportunity to either go in and adjust the retainage amounts or, wait a little bit longer until you need to actually release that retainage. So pretty useful feature, just more flexibility with the billing system to kind of account for those real world situations that we know pop up pretty frequently. So yeah, that's pretty much it for billing flexibility, and I'll kick it back over to Sam.
Awesome. Yeah, that's one of the things we're always focused on, is how can we continue to make that billing process as seamless as possible for you as a GC and then also for the subs. So now we'll kind of round down this webinar by looking at what's upcoming, what you can expect over the next few months. And generally it's in three themes: improvements to the billing process. Again, that's something we'll always be investing in. As we know, it's kind of core to our day-to-day workflow. throughout the billing process. And then expanded data management, we'll touch on what that might look like, but that's things like compliance and payments and making sure that things that aren't directly related to submitting a pay app, but are still very important, we're investing in that. And then integrations development and how we can improve that. So starting out really with what's upcoming, separate from integrations, is some of the key features here on this list is a couple call outs that we'll kind of talk through. First, I'll start on the right, and Garrett will touch on some of these on the left here. But from a compliance perspective, we're looking at compliance templates and then a compliance task list / kind of activity tracker. So for the templates, these are things, again, that you could set up once inside your company settings. And then as vendors get assigned to contracts, those will automatically be created for them. So you won't have to manually create those same compliance requirements over and over again. Our goal is to save you time and, again, ensure that accuracy for every single subcontractor, ensure that it's seamless. And then the compliance task list, this is a place where as you request and validate and track those compliance items, you can go back to it and see what was the latest activity on that compliance requirement, whether it's a comment or a hold on a payment from this compliance or billing. You can know, anyone in your company can know why and when that activity took place and what we're doing about it. So we're excited about both of those. We know it's really key for the billing process, but something we're continuing to work through.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. So I'll go ahead and pick up over here on the left-hand side. We'll start with advanced retainage rules. So this may or may not be applicable to everybody, but oftentimes based on, what states you're doing work in and different statutory laws, there may be certain requirements around how much retainage has to be held and when that you have to abide by as the general contractor. So the most common example of this is, if you do any work in the state of Alabama, I believe the rule is you hold 10% retainage up until 50% of the contract is complete, and then you have to drop that rate down to 0%. So today within FlashTrack, we don't really have a great way to support that kind of rule. So what we're doing is we're kind of building a rule system that would allow you to set up that rule that automatically reduces the retainage rate once a trigger or threshold is met. Again, the common scenario there is, maybe it's 50% complete, or maybe it's 5% of retainage held on the contract, but the system would be automatically reducing the rate at that point in time. And then the last thing that kind of falls under the advanced retainage rules is allowing you to store or hold retainage at a different rate on store material than you would on labor. So again, not sure if it's applicable to everybody, but it is pretty common to hear that, retainage gets held at a different rate based on if it's labor or material. So we would be able to, in the future, support that in the system. So that kind of covers advanced retainage rules. Moving on to lower tier automated lien waiver collection. So this will kind of tie back into the lower tier module that we demoed a few minutes ago. And the purpose of this enhancement is to allow your company to set up a requirement around when you need certain lower tier waivers collected. So similar to a billing rule or a billing requirement, what you could do is you could say, hey, my company needs unconditional lien waivers or lower tier waivers, let's just say 30 days after every invoice submission in order for, my business to pay that subcontractor. So you could actually set up that rule within the system. And then as soon as that threshold gets met, FlashTrack will require that your sub upload that unconditional waiver. And we'll actually give you the ability to block them from moving forward with their next invoice if that file has not been provided yet. So super excited about that. I think, once that gets released, we'll have a pretty robust lower tier management system that should be able to account for, a lot of the things that you would want to track as a general contractor, and hopefully save some time with those rules. So lastly, moving on to payments improvements. So we have a couple of buckets that we're looking to improve for payments. And really ultimately in my head, I think about it in two categories. So the first would be, payments user experience, and that would be things like, when you get to the different pages in the payments module, really only seeing the things that you need to see, and then making it super easy to navigate. Additionally, with payments user experience, we're also exploring ways to make our ACH payments quicker, which is always a good thing. The faster we can get subs paid, the better at the end of the day. And then ultimately kind of shifting more toward payment methods, we're also exploring adding joint payment capability into the payments module. And then additionally, we're taking a look at getting some digital check functionality as well. So excited about where payments is going in the future. I think the awesome part about our payments module is that we can tie in, all of the data that's feeding in from the rest of FlashTrack. So compliance information, lower tier information, just all of that data gets tied into the payments module, making it easier as the GC to understand, hey, should I really be paying this person or not? So excited about where it's going. Yeah, I'll kick it back over to Sam for the next one.
Sweet. Thanks, Garrett. And then I will have Mike pass us down for the integrations, and then we'll wrap up the webinar shortly after that.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, so we are in the process of adding 2 brand new integrations. So depending on what project management and accounting tools you use, this could be relevant to you. So at the top here, the next one on the pipeline is going to be our integration with CMIC. And this will work very similarly in terms of the data flow to what I demoed earlier with the Procore integration. So jobs, vendors, subcontracts, and change orders would flow from CMIC into FlashTrack, where you could use our tool as you normally do. And then as you get those invoices submitted from subs and you approve them, you can push those back into CMIC as vouchers. Jonas Premier integration is also coming down the pipeline in the next few months. We'll be pulling the projects, vendors, contracts, change orders, and again, pushing those invoices back into Jonas after the subs bill. And then lastly, in terms of enhancements to our existing integrations, we'll be taking all that data and those payments that are generated during the payments process that Garrett showed. And for our Vista integration, we'll be pushing that data back into Vista. So when you go into your AP module and you have those invoices that are in from FlashTrack, we'll be able to then mark which of those have been paid the FlashTrack app as well. So just another way we're more tightly integrating those systems, that the accounting system is completely up to date with the payments that you're issuing in FlashTrack.
Awesome. Good stuff. So then lastly here, what we want to look at is just a reminder that all the things we covered and all the things that will continue to ship, you can go into our documentation, and then within this what's new section, when you click into that, you'll see all our release notes. Every month we're publishing new release notes that cover in detail the features that we had and more that we didn't have time for. And as we continue to update it, we always love, you can see that and new updates there. And then submitting feedback. So one of the things we love is getting customer feedback. It shapes a lot of what we do here at FlashTrack. And you can do that by going to the help center within the app and then clicking on this suggested feature. So whenever you do that, it goes through our entire product team, Mike, Garrett, myself, our head of product, Ben, and then we review it and talk about each and every one of the pieces of feedback. So it's extremely helpful and something we love getting from our customers. So I know we're a little over time here, but if there's any kind of questions you might have or anything you want to throw out, please do that in the chat or in the Q&A tool. If not, if you think of something later, just don't hesitate to email the product@flashtrack.com. We'll happily answer your questions there. Garrett, I think we see only about one question here, but there was a question coming in around payments. If there was an additional fee for sending ACH transactions, or if it was, what was the fee structure look like for using ACH in FlashTrack?
Yeah, right. So we don't actually have a per transaction fee. The way we sort of price payments is if you have the subscription model that includes the payments feature, you get unlimited payments, unlimited unconditional tracking, unlimited ACH transactions. So I can definitely follow up with with you and kind of send that a little bit more information over, just to give a bit more information around the pricing model. But generally speaking, we don't charge per ACH transaction. It's typically just priced into your subscription fee that you would pay every year. So
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, I know we're over again. I don't see any other additional questions coming in, but if you think of anything on the call, please don't hesitate to email us or individually or at product@FlashTrack, and we'll happily reply there. But appreciate everybody's time. Thanks for coming out today and attending the webinar.